for you. Hi guys. Hi, I'm Ursula with the Mies team, and here's Jordan. We're not going to get started for another maybe minute or two, but while we are waiting for some more people to join the call, usually I ask you guys to be really cringe and tell me where you're located, or if you could also just hit up the chat and just say where you are and what you do. I've oftentimes been really surprised by the different locations we have, and also maybe your position in the industry, because I'm personally team pastry and bakery. So I always like to have some camaraderie because I'm always talking to chefs like Jordan. But yeah, feel free to hit up the chat while we wait for a couple more people to join and we talk about the weather in Maine more. And Jordan, you were just in, so I know you did a collab with Turkey and the Wolf, right? Like kind of recently.
Yeah. In I think it was March or February. Yeah, it was like a great time.
Oh, that's so fun. And then how was the one with big kids that you did?
That was a fun one too. So that one we did at Crispy Guy. And those dudes are awesome. They're also kind of wild. So we went out and did like the whole,
Everything.
Portland
Did you
bar.
tell them that I said hi?
I did. Well actually we're planning a Mr. Tuna at Big Kids. It's happening. So
Okay, well, you guys heard it here first. Are you allowed to say when that might be happening?
we don't have a date yet, but I'm pretty sure. Let me see what we talked about.
Oh, we have Brooklyn. I'm in Brooklyn. Welcome, Brooklyn, and hello, Atlanta and Springfield. See, this is fun. Okay.
Ooh, looks like October,
Okay.
November, November.
Everyone can book their flights to Chicago in November. It's not miserable yet then, I promise. It's kind of cold then, but it's not that bad. Okay, so for the sake of time, I think let's just get started.
Sure.
Those of you that are here, hi again. So just a little bit of background before we get into this. My name's Ursula. I'm with the Mies team. I am chef and baker. And I'll just be kind of doing these webinar series to talk to people in industry, to talk more about what they do, what they specialize in, and also, for more guidance for those that are in industry and looking to learn more. So today we have Jordan with us. Jordan is a phenomenally talented chef based out of Portland, Maine. You have three restaurants now working
Yeah, we got
with.
three.
I had the distinct pleasure of getting to try a couple of them when I was there last year. He does phenomenal things with fish that are insane, but also let's not forget, he made my favorite fried chicken I've ever had in my life, not even as an undersell. My partner and I talk about it all the time. But what we're going to talk about today is a little bit more of the process of how to open a new restaurant, what that process looks like, kind of how to make those choices to transition from, working for someone else to working for yourself. So Jordan, do you want to give yourself a little intro? I know I probably said some stuff already, but you
Uh,
want to.
yeah, my name's Jordan Rubin. I'm originally from Massachusetts. Worked mostly in Boston and around the Boston area for a good chunk of my career before I moved here to Portland, Maine, and we started our businesses here in Portland. We have currently we have three restaurants. Mr. Tuna was the original, which is a sushi bar, started as a food cart, and Crispy Guy is our Thai fried chicken street food cocktail bar restaurant, and we just opened Bar Futo just recently in December. That is all Binchotan fired cooking, kind of izakaya esque, lots of Japanese influenced eyeballs, all sorts of fun Japanese cocktails and stuff like that. So
And then you're already working on another concept, is that right?
I am. I can't get into too much detail about it, but I can say it's going to be in Portland, and it will be a seafood focused restaurant.
Love. Okay, so I think my first question is starting just at the basics. And maybe this changes when you're opening your first restaurant versus later concepts. But when did you first decide you wanted to open a spot? And being Mr. Tuna, obviously. And how did you figure out what that concept would be?
So for me, the first concept, Mr. Tuna, was just a very obvious choice. My background was very heavily in the sushi world, so um, I wanted to open a sushi bar, sushi restaurant. So that was a really easy one to conceptualize. It did kind of change because it started as a food cart. So before we got the restaurant, we were literally in this little hot dog cart, just me and my fiance, Marissa. And the menu was very simple. It was just hand rolls. So we just did tamaki and we did some sushi burritos. That was kind of the concept there. The idea was to have food that you could walk around with, and we wanted to do sushi, and we thought, doing like regular maki rolls might not work on the street, and it honestly doesn't. So we're happy that we went that route. And after about 6 months of just doing the cart, we wanted to get a brick and mortar. Especially being Maine, we're very seasonal here, and for a food cart, food truck, you have maybe 6 months, 7 months if you're lucky. So we wanted to be able to do something year round. So that was kind of the next move for us, was to find a space where we could be year round.
And so when you were opening like the cart and then transitioning into brick and mortar, you mentioned having a simple menu. And I think something, so like for just a little insight of like, I owned a Jewish deli, and Jewish deli is known for having the most menu of all time. So something that I always struggled with was, how do you reel in what the concept is, and how do you really define like what that core menu looks like how big should it be? So do you have any kind of tips or insights into how to make those decisions when you're creating a concept?
Yeah, I mean, it's from our kind of experience, we always started small and expanded. So, uh, you know, try not to do too much in the beginning, because you can always add on. You definitely want to have, the core menu items. For us, we always had like items on the menus that never changed, but we run a lot of specials. And then as we grew, we were able to add things to the menu. A lot of times what you can do is based on what your space is. So um, there's a lot of limitations. So kind of have to work around that when you're creating the menu. To make sure you
Like
can.
what, like how many items would you say is like a good core menu? I mean, depending on the space you're working in makes a huge difference, like you mentioned. But like, are there ever times where you've woken up one day and been like, whoa, this idea that I started out with as like a seed is now this whole huge thing, like I gotta reel it in? Or has it always been very like, this is like, I have four things I'm working on, I'll make it five when I'm ready, and then going from there?
Yeah, on the cart originally, we definitely did it that way. We started really small. I think it was like 6 items on the menu, and then we slowly expanded. And same with like the Jewish deli, sushi restaurants usually have like pretty large menus. It's like a lot of crossover items. So, we have like the stuff to make, a large menu with not a lot of items. So uh, there was a point where I was like, holy shit, this menu is way too big. And we did scale it back a little, just because it's a lot for people. This was also during COVID, we started doing QR codes. So people, they'd be like scrolling through the menu, and it took too long, and it was just like a little too much. And I think having having like a smaller menu, but with, more like bangers on the menu, instead of just trying to fill it in so you have enough stuff. I think it's more important to put the things you're really, really confident about on there, and then adding stuff as you feel comfortable doing.
So you mentioned obviously COVID being something that has really, really just kind of permanently impacted service industry. That brought a lot of pivots to every aspect of restaurants and that were already open or that were planning to open and now are opening. So what is maybe a mindset you found yourself in to be the most helpful when you have a pivot that you have to face? Like, for example, like you found a spot that now you've realized the way that the kitchen is built out, you can't do 15 of the menu items you wanted to do because you won't be able to fit that equipment in there, or a pandemic happens and things shut down. So how do you sort of brace yourself for those changes and navigate them as they come up when they impact your concept?
Well, you have to be flexible. I mean, that's a big one. There's going to be times where you're going to have to um, make decisions, and they might be really hard decisions, but you need to just be able to go with the flow, I guess. Or when things change, you have to be able to make those changes. So we made so many over the last like 3 years. It's hard to keep up with them all. But when we see something, there's a drop in business because of a certain reason. Like why is this happening? Like what can we do to fix this? Instead of waiting till it's too late and then you're looking back and like, oh, I wish we did something then. So
Yeah.
being flexible and being able to, change things in your concept. You don't want to change the core things that make you you, but there are things that you can do, that you can change to, you know, change with the times. If things are like a lot of our seafood became unavailable for a while, like a lot of the products we were getting from Japan, we just couldn't get them. So we had to find ways to work around those challenges, and that's the key, just being flexible.
Yeah. Do you find that because like you said, like it's you don't want to change the core things about you when you're fluctuating like with different things that come up. There's such a struggle between like sticking to your guns and your concept and who you are as like a chef and what you wanted it to be versus the reality of a concept that's being like presented to market and used every day. Do you find yourself more on the camp of like I am a chef and I'm dedicated to my craft. And if there are fluctuations in our sales, I got to stick to it for a while to make sure that they get it? Or do you find yourself more on like the customers are asking for something different? I want to pivot to meet that need.
Um, I mean, I definitely don't let people's opinions change what I'm doing. It has to be like a long time of something. People are constantly saying something. We'll listen. We're always listening, but you can't let people tell you how to run your business. So I think that sticking to your concept is incredibly important. Uh, but making changes, sometimes you have to make financial decisions too. It's not, at the end of the day, we are running a business. And if, if your ideas don't work, if what you're doing isn't working financially, eventually you're going to have to make those decisions or you're not going to be in business any longer. So,
How
uh,
often do you feel yourself like reviewing that kind of aspect of like, all right, how are we doing? Like take a step back. Is the concept working with the items we have in and what needs to change to make it better?
I think I feel like every day I'm thinking about it. Especially with the new businesses, we're thinking about stuff like that all the time. How many like are we going to reserve? How many tables are we going to reserve on Resi? How many are open to walk in? Are we going to reserve the patio? Are we going to leave that all for walk in? So like for the new business, it's a lot of that every day. For Mr. Tuna, it's been around like 6 years. There's not as many changes like that going on. Definitely with COVID, we had to make a bunch of changes, but yeah, you just have to be you have to stick to your guns, but also be willing to make sacrifices.
Is it just kind of like a gut feeling on when those things happen, or just kind of like hope and a prayer that the prices fluctuate? Because that was something that I always had a hard time with, was being a deli that made everything in house and the pricing going through the roof. It's like you opt for, are you just going to start buying in pre-made products and not be what you want it to be? Or do you have to just deal with like, jacking prices up or changing method and hoping that people understand?
Well, for us, I mean, our standard of quality has to be met. Like, we won't go under that. So, if there's a product that we just can't find it any cheaper for the same quality, then we'll raise the price. And I hate doing it, but over the last couple of years, we've had to do it many times.
Yeah.
And the price of seafood has fluctuated. Some things like 50 have gone up 50, 60, 70%. We've seen that with scallops. We've seen it with crab. So, where we can make those changes, if we can find a product that we find that's comparable and we don't feel like it's going to affect the overall quality of everything, then we will make those changes. But some things you just can't. You just can't. And because at the end of the day, that's going to really affect your business. Your customers will notice these things. If you switch from you're making the desserts to all of a sudden you're buying something in, people will notice that, and ultimately will lose business in the long run. So sometimes those aren't the sacrifices you can make or you should make, in my opinion.
Yeah. So everyone knows that cost of goods is a huge bummer right now, and that's just its own thing. So on to like something maybe a little bit more fun. You want to walk me through a little bit more of your process of how you R&D for a new concept? Like, how do you figure out what are these dishes that are going to be the core of what it is, and what is that like?
Well, for us, for a crispy guy, it started as a pop-up inside of Mr. Tuna, kind of like a ghost kitchen situation. So before we had the restaurant, we were able to R&D it a lot and see what people are ordering, what people like. So we had kind of the advantage of doing that everyone doesn't have. And then for Bar Futo, we kind of had the same thing, but it wasn't intentional. We got held up by the city for like 6 months trying to open. So out of necessity, we just started doing pop-ups of the concept. And we doing the same thing, like testing out dishes. A lot of those dishes that we did in the original pop-ups are on the menu now. And a lot of them we'll probably never do again because they just didn't work out. But there's a lot less pressure when you're doing some of these pop-ups than when the restaurant's open. I think once we're open R&Ding, we run a lot of specials. Uh, but I guess that's once we're open. When we're getting to there, I mean, there would be like tastings. We would do tastings at one of the other restaurants. So like the chef would come in and make a bunch of the dishes, and we would have 3 or 4 of our management group tasting everything. And we're very collaborative on these things, so there's a lot of opinions, and I think that always helps. Just trying to, you're never really gonna know until you're open how things are gonna go. Um, it's going to be in a new kitchen, new space, the flow of service. So you can do your best to come up with the dishes, but ultimately once you're open, you're going to know what you can do and what you can't do.
Have you ever had like a core recipe where you thought to yourself, like, okay, I know I want to do, like, for example, with Crispy Guy, like I want to do like a fried chicken spot, and this is going to be like one of the hits. And then you open and everyone is just like, we prefer other things. Has that ever happened?
Sure. Yeah. It definitely happens. It happens not that much because Kyle, who's the chef at Crispy Guy, he does such an amazing job, and um, yeah, it doesn't happen very often, but when it does, we know because we'll run a dish, and usually it will be on it will be a special for a week or two before it's a permanent spot on the menu. So that's kind of our area to test things out before we put them on there permanently. But yeah, it's definitely happened where we, even at Bar Futo, we were putting on like a giant steak, and it just didn't sell. People wanted the skewers, they wanted the small plates, and we kept pushing it. And an $80 steak is a tough sell sometimes, but uh, we realized within like a month that it wasn't the right menu item for us, so we took it off. But yeah, you got to be willing to make the changes.
Yeah. So you also talked a bit about how you were held up for about 6 months on opening for Bar Futo. I feel like there are a lot of hoops to jump through to open a restaurant or to even do like a pop-up or a first cart. Like going from that to brick and mortar is a really steep learning curve that I never felt like I was fully prepared for. And it felt like nobody really told you about all the like legal parts and the other little things that are entailed. So what do you think was, one of the most surprising hurdles you had when you went to opening your first brick and mortar that you really learned from when opening your next locations?
I mean, when you think you're gonna open is never when you actually open. That's that's the thing people say, and you're like, oh yeah, yeah. Like I
But
got
I'll
it.
be different.
Yeah, it'll be different. But there's always things that happen, and they're always gonna push you back. If you actually open when you think you are, then you are the minority for sure. I think most people find that out. So you have to factor that in when you're opening. Just be like, I actually think realistically we could open in May. Add another 3 months onto that, just to be safe, because there's nothing worse than having all these plans to open. You've hired your staff, and then you can't open. So what do you do with the people that rely on you for a paycheck, and they've left their other jobs, and that's a tough position to be in. You also don't want to be paying rent for very long when you're not open. So you have to factor that in too with your negotiations with the landlord. Because they're always going to be like, "Oh yeah, you can get open in 3 months." But that's their motivation, is to start getting paid rent, and you always have to push back, say yes, I understand that, but the reality is, I've done this and I know how long it takes, so we need more time. So always ask for way more than you think you'll need, and then maybe you guys could meet in the middle. But everything's a negotiation. If you don't ask for it in the beginning, then you're never going to get it.
Yeah, 100%. I worked with a broker on my spot and I didn't really understand the value of a broker until I started looking at restaurant spaces, but there were so many like acronyms I didn't know that he knew very well, including obviously for having that runway of a few months of like relief rent before you're open, and running through that much faster than you think. So what would you say then is maybe a mistake that you made when opening Mr. Tuna that you then got to learn from when opening your like Crispy Guy or Bar Futo?
um, well, location, I think that's the big one, because Mr. Tuna's location is okay. It's not the best, and I was very anxious to get a space at the time, so I let my emotions get the best of me. And um, when we opened Crispy and Barfuto, I was like, okay, I don't mind paying more in rent, because we can make that difference back as long as it's a reasonable difference. You gotta, crunch all the numbers and see, but at the end of the day, a better location is, unless you have this amazing following already, or you know then people are going to come seek you out. um that's definitely the biggest thing. I made sure that the Crispy Guy and Barfuto were in great spots with lots of foot traffic, and that's been definitely a hurdle for Mr. Tuna that we've been dealing with for like 5 years, and we made the best of it. But I think the amount of work we put in to the space, we would have gotten a lot of return in a different location.
Yeah. And do you think that that rush to open was because like it was your first brick and mortar? So you were just like, I got to do it on a timeline. Like, was it like a timeline that you created, or was that something that like had other circumstances around it?
Well, where Mr. Tuna is it's in a public market, so it's kind of like an incubator type space for businesses that are getting off the ground. So a lot of the places that come in here, they're here for like a year or two, and then they move on to something bigger. It's kind of like what the food cart was for me, but I ended up just expanding instead. So instead of like using it as like a jump off point to something else, I stuck around and I expanded our space inside the public market. So, sorry, what was the question?
Oh, it was just like, was that like an accelerated timeline that you were rushing into things because it was your first time like doing the full like brick and mortar?
Definitely, yeah. I mean, I didn't know a lot. I didn't work with a broker back then. We wanted to get into space, and yeah, I definitely let that kind of push me towards it instead of thinking about it a little bit longer, which is really important because this is where you're going to be for the next 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 years. So what you're thinking about now, you also have to think about 3, 4 years ago. What is this place going to look like then? It's easy to look at the here and now, and make decisions based on that, but you kind of have to look forward to.
Yeah, I wish that was something that like I feel like everybody tells you, but it's so hard to really retain. Like I had this need to open a restaurant before I was 30, which is so made up and like why. And so you make all these concessions and choices just to speed up the process because you just want to get it done. But you have forever to have the restaurant open, and living with that reality is very different than the excitement of opening it. So I definitely wish that somebody had told me that in a way that I would understand better prior. So we have like 1 minute left here. Is there
Wow.
any final advice that you have to somebody who is looking to go out on their own? Or any questions that they might have for you also? You guys can type them in there, but any final advice?
I mean, don't listen to too many people. I mean, as I'm giving you advice now. But I mean, listen to people that you really trust and have relative experience that they can speak from. But people are going to be telling you stuff all the time. Oh, you should do this. You should do this. Don't do this. Especially when it comes to your actual concept. You know your concept better than anyone else. So you have to believe in yourself and believe in what you're doing, and don't get off the path because of somebody else's opinion, because it's gonna happen a million times. People are gonna tell you things, so you need to kind of stick with what you believe in, and it's gonna be really hard in the beginning. Especially right when you start, you're gonna probably question why you did it, but things get better most of the time, and you just have to tough out that first.
So like a daily gut check followed by a daily pause
Yeah.
before we do anything. I think there's one question that we got in here, if we have a sec to answer it. How important is it to have a partner, a business partner?
If you can find a partner that just gives you money and that's it, and doesn't ask for a lot in return, then I would say it's important. I only have a partner at Crispy Guy, and luckily we work well together, and he's an amazing chef. But we don't have partners at the other restaurants, and it's just like it complicates everything. Everything's more complicated with a partner. So when you pick a partner, you're essentially like marrying that person. So you guys are married to this business, and so I would say be cautious. And if you do,
Lawyer.
yeah, definitely get a lawyer. Have them look over everything. But yeah, try to work. If you can find somebody that just wants to give you money and they just want, to get paid back in return and something on top, that is the ideal partnership. What you don't want is somebody that's going to be trying to tell you how to run your business, because most of the time the investors don't know anything. About the business, the restaurant business. They might know something about uh, tech sales or something, but that's not relative. So that's my
Yeah, there's definitely that process of when you're seeking financial from when you're starting to open, where you kind of get this gut feeling of this person feels like they have a lot of opinions. And that's usually, for me, means it's a sign to walk away versus somebody that's just like, you know what, I believe in you, go off, do your thing. It's a really big difference between those kinds of styles because even if you have clauses of what they legally can and can't affect in your restaurant, their opinion will still be there if they have them prior to giving you that money, and it'll be there 10 times as much afterwards. At least that's what I found.
You want this like the silent partner that's actually just silent, they only, you know, they're only there to support you and to help you do your dream. And that's really what an investor is. Partner, I mean, if they are a big part of the business, then it's a little different because you can lean on them. But a lot of times, having a partner that doesn't do anything, it creates resentment, and ultimately that doesn't work. So be very, very cautious and selective, I would say.
All right. Any other questions before I let you guys all get back to your days? We answered all the questions about how to open a concept. Look at us. We did that in 30 minutes. All right. Well, thank you guys so much for taking the time. And thank you so, so much, Jordan, for talking to me about this. We will have a recording of this call sent to everyone that was here. And then, of course, if you guys are ever in Portland, go please to all the places we talked about today. But also Jordan is constantly like on the road doing really dope collaborations with people. So if he comes to a city near you, keep an eye out because what he does is unreal. And it would be a disservice not to try it.
Oh yeah. Thank you. Thank you guys. Thanks for coming. Definitely look into Me's. Very interesting. We use it at all our restaurants. So shameless plug there. But yeah, thanks, Ursula, and thank you everybody for joining us today.
All right. Bye, guys.